southeastern side of the general reception area, under the glass dome marked as Exit A. That is the area that you've just come from outside. It's outside of this door, and if you would just go to your right, that is Exit A. On the northern side, past the conference and syndicate rooms, marked as Exit C. I think for many of you, that would have been where you came in, and that is down the long corridor behind me. Should you be uncertain of any of these exits, please do not hesitate to ask the conference center personnel for assistance in this regard. Evacuations in the Reserve Bank are initiated by one of three possible means. The first one is the activation of a siren, an announcement over the public address system, or you will be asked to evacuate by the conference center personnel. The conference center personnel will take charge of and direct all building evacuations. Please don't panic during the evacuation. Please remain calm and follow the guidance of the conference center personnel and also the security personnel who will help you. Please follow the evacuation officials to the designated assembly points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janine. Good morning. Shareholders, members of the board of directors, deputy governors, ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. I hereby declare the 98th Annual Ordinary General Meeting, the AGM, duly constituted in terms of the regulations framed under the South African Reserve Bank Act number 90 of 1989 as amended, hereinafter referred to as the SAP Act. I would like to advise that the meeting is being recorded. Allow me to introduce my colleagues on the podium with me. They are Deputy Governors Daniel Minele, Francois Groep, and Kuben Naidu. The Chairperson of the Audit Committee, Mr. Rob Barrow. Chairperson of the Remuneration Committee, Ms. Vinette Klein. The Chairperson of the Non-Executive Directors Committee, Mr. Gary Ralphie. Attendance register, and also indicate who you are representing to ensure that we have a complete attendance record of the meeting. All shareholders present who hold 200 or more shares in the SAP and who are entitled to vote in accordance with the provisions of the SAP Act and its regulations should be in possession of an electronic voting device. Please indicate if you are a shareholder entitled to vote but have not yet registered or received the voting device. It's a little device, looks like an old BlackBerry. Okay. Please note that only shareholders or their valid proxies will be permitted to speak during the formalities of this meeting. Every shareholder should have received a yellow laminated card on registration. This card must please be raised for identification purposes when a shareholder wishes to comment or ask a question at this meeting. Well, let's move to the formal part of the meeting. If everyone is set. This past year was, to some extent, one of contrasting halves. The second half of 2017 saw a generally constructive global backdrop for South Africa and other emerging markets. The recovery in the advanced economies continued at a steady pace, with most showing signs of sustained growth. In the United States, growth was above the estimated potential and unemployment continued to decline. Economic activity in the euro area surprised on the upside after a protracted period of sluggish growth. A notable exception to this trend was the United Kingdom, where growth prospects were adversely affected by the uncertainty arising from the decision to leave the European Union. There were also indications that while the withdrawal of monetary policy stimulus was likely to continue in the advanced economies, the policy tightening cycle was expected to be moderate. These settings remain supportive of strong capital flows to emerging markets. Stronger demand underpinned higher commodity prices, reinforced by strong growth in China. This favorable setting did not last long into the first half of 2018. Expectations of a faster pace of monetary tightening than previously expected began to emerge as the strong US growth was sustained. The US unemployment rate reached levels below the estimated natural rate, while fiscal policy became more expansionary. This put upward pressure on the long-term US Treasury yields, which exceeded 3% for the first time since July 2011. Surprisingly, US inflation remained stubbornly below the target of 2% in the absence of significant wage growth. The recent communications of the Federal Open Markets Committee appear to have reinforced the likelihood of a tighter stance, which in turn has sustained US dollar strength. By contrast, growth in the euro area and Japan slowed, leading to a reassessment of expectations of early withdrawal of monetary policy accommodation in these regions. In addition, the strong dollar effect dominated global markets, which saw a reversal of capital flows from emerging markets, reminiscent of the so-called taper tantrum in 2013. While most emerging markets are assessed to be more resilient to these developments than was the case at that time, their exchange rates and bond yields have come under pressure, although experiences have differed widely. Two other developments overshadowed the global environment in the first half of 2018. First, while most commodity prices declined during the first half of this year, the international oil price continued what seemed to be an inexorable ascent. This was driven to a large degree by the successful implementation of the agreement to restrict output by the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and some non-OPEC members. The result was an increase in the price of Brent crude oil from $50 per barrel in July last year to around $80 by June this year. Although some moderation has been evident recently, the outlook remains uncertain, with mixed views by analysts in this regard. To date, the impact on domestic petrol prices and on inflation has been significant. The second development was a marked escalation in the changes to US trade policy. Initially, tariff increases were focused primarily on China, but have subsequently been broadened to encompass some traditional allies of the US as well. It is still unclear whether these conditions and countervailing reactions will evolve into a full-blown trade war. However, the rise in protectionism has already had a moderating impact, but the sharp contraction in world trade that was recorded in April would be protracted. This was the worst performance in world trade since May 2015. The net result of all of these global developments has been a generally deteriorating environment for emerging markets. During the second half of last year, the domestic economic outlook was overshadowed by heightened political uncertainty in the lead-up to the African National Congress elective conference. Business and consumer confidence were at extremely low levels. Although the 1.3% growth rate for the year exceeded the post-crisis low of 0.6% recorded in 2016. It was in stark contrast to the average emerging market growth rate of 4.7%. The low growth and deteriorating fiscal position exacerbated the risk of rating agencies' downgrades that could have seen South African bonds falling out of some of the major global bond indices. In response to these developments and risks, the rand remained under pressure for much of that period and reached its weakest level of 14.47 rands against the US dollar during November. Renewed optimism following the outcome of the ANC's elective conference set in during the early part of 2018. Consumer confidence reached a record high in the first quarter of the year and remained high, although slightly lower in the second quarter. Business confidence also improved significantly in the first quarter, but fell back again in the second quarter. The rand exchange rate appreciated to 11 rands 55 in late February, a level last seen in mid-2015. At the same time, there was a positive response to the 2018 government budget, which reconfirmed the commitment to fiscal consolidation and maintaining the expenditure ceiling. This also helped to avoid a downgrade of South African domestic government debt to sub-investment grade. Unfortunately, the boost to confidence did not translate into a short-term boost to actual growth. Following an upside surprise growth rate of 3.1% in the final quarter of 2017, the economy contracted by 2.2% in the first quarter of this year. At this stage, the high-frequency data for the second quarter indicate that a modest improvement is likely in the quarter, and the SAP does not expect a second consecutive quarter of contraction. Nevertheless, a reassessment of the growth outlook has resulted in a downward revision to the SAP's GDP growth forecast for 2018 from 1.7% to 1.6%. Growth of 1.9% is expected in 2019, whilst the forecast for 2020 remains unchanged at 2%. At these growth levels, we cannot expect to make appreciable inroads into the unemployment problem of the country. During the past year, monetary policy has been able to achieve its objective of keeping inflation within the target range of 3 to 6%. Consumer price index inflation has been continuously within the target range since April 2017 and is expected to remain within the target range for the rest of the forecast period ending in 2020. Inflation averaged 4.7% during the past financial year and reached a recent low of 3.8% in March of this year, the lowest level recorded since 2010. The favorable outcome was due in part to lower food price increases following the end of the drought in most parts of the country, as well as subdued domestic demand. However, the low point of the inflation cycle appears to be behind us, as the impact of VAT increase and higher petrol prices, and more recently, the depreciated exchange rate is being felt. The improved inflation outlook and below potential growth afforded some space for monetary policy to be more accommodative. This was particularly in the context of a moderation in inflation expectations during the first half of this year. For some time, these expectations have been stubbornly anchored at the upper end of the target range. In July 2017 and March 2018, the SAP's MPC reduced the repurchase rate by 25 basis points on each occasion to its current level of 6.5%. The MPC still assesses the monetary policy stance to be accommodative and appropriate in the context of the current state of the economy. But there is a limit to what monetary policy can do to stimulate growth. At best, monetary policy can provide support over the cycle and can provide a stable environment for growth. As the MPC has emphasized on numerous occasions, a firm commitment by government to credible structural policy initiatives and implementation is required to make an appreciable impact on employment and potential output. At the March MPC, we warned that global risks in particular could upset the improved inflation outlook. Unfortunately, these risks, which I have highlighted earlier, have taken center stage. Since April, the rand has depreciated alongside other emerging market currencies. Together with the higher international oil prices, the depreciation of the local currency has resulted in domestic petrol prices reaching record highs in nominal terms. Furthermore, risks from higher electricity prices have also emerged. At the recent meeting of the MPC, the repurchase rate was kept unchanged, although concern was expressed regarding the possibility of upside risks to the inflation outlook materializing. At this stage, inflation is still expected to remain within the target range for the forecast period, but at higher average levels than previously thought. The most recent forecast suggests that inflation will average 4.8% this year, but is then expected to rise to 5.6% and 5.4% respectively in the coming 2 years. This upward drift will not help in our quest to get inflation and inflation expectations anchored closer to the midpoint of the target range. However, because the deteriorating outlook is driven mainly by supply-side factors, the MPC will, as usual, look through the first-round effects. The MPC will maintain its vigilance and will react should there be second-round effects that take inflation significantly away from the midpoint of the target range. Protecting and enhancing financial stability is now an explicit statutory mandate of the SARB. After a protracted process, the Financial Sector Regulations Act was enacted in August last year, and the Prudential Authority was officially established within the SARB on the 1st of April 2018. This involved the transfer of a number of employees from the former Financial Services Board, particularly those tasked with the regulation of the insurance industry. This responsibility now resides in the SARB and adds to the long-standing role that the SARB has played in regulating and supervising the banking sector. The amalgamation facilitates the SARB's role in maintaining, promoting, and enhancing financial stability in the country at both the macro and micro prudential levels. In general, the banking system remains sound and well capitalized, and there were no significant financial stability risks during the past year. Nevertheless, there were a number of highly publicized events that were not assessed to be systemic in nature, but which do hold important lessons for all of us. In particular, they have underlined the importance of having a strong and ethical audit profession as an integral component of maintaining financial stability. In March 2018, having observed signs of a severe liquidity crisis, the SARB placed VBS Mutual Bank under curatorship with the aim of protecting the interests of depositors. Subsequent to this step, the SARB instituted forensic investigation into possible fraud and or material misstatements. Financial statements are currently being restated, and until they are, we will not know the full extent of the problem. Any evidence of wrongdoing will be handed over to the relevant law enforcement authorities. Given the size of VBS Mutual Bank and its limited interconnectedness with the rest of the financial sector, it is not assessed to pose a systemic risk. Nevertheless, it did create hardship and anxiety for the thousands of retail depositors who stood to lose their life savings. Fortunately, most of these deposits are now guaranteed by the National Treasury, although the corporate and municipal deposits are not. On the 7th of July, the SARB announced a mechanism to repay retail depositors up to 100,000 rands of their deposits in the troubled bank. Some criticism has been leveled at the SARB for not picking up evidence of fraud and or wrongdoing at VBS Mutual Bank earlier. It is not the role of the regulator to run the bank. The regulator's role is to protect the depositors of the bank, not the shareholders, and to ensure that the bank adheres to its prescribed prudential requirements. The governance of the bank is the responsibility of its board, and its operations are in the hands of management. It goes without saying that proper control systems and governance structures are of paramount importance. As regulators, we have to rely on the accounts given to us by the bank as the basis for our risk management, and these will have been signed off by both internal and the external auditors. The auditors, in turn, rely on the information provided to them and cannot be held responsible if they are misled by fraudulent activities. However, if they are complicit in the misstatements or irregularities in the running of the bank, they will be held accountable. Regulators cannot prevent banks from failing if bad or illegal business decisions are made. Our role is to ensure that bank failures do not put the entire banking and financial system at risk. The issue of the integrity of company audits was also in the spotlight with another potential financial stability risk: the collapse of the share price of Steinhoff International Holdings following the announcement of an investigation into alleged accounting irregularities raised concerns about the exposure of South African banks to the company. Fortunately, the company's debt is mainly concentrated in foreign banks, and the impact of a potential default on loans on the domestic banking system appears to be limited. During the past year, we also had to deal with the potential risks posed by a questionable report on Capitec Bank and the subsequent short selling of the bank's shares, which caused some volatility in its share price. The SAP's view is that Capitec Bank is well capitalized and has sufficient liquidity. The share price has since clawed back most of its losses, and there was no run on the bank. At the previous AGM, I reported on our challenge to the public protector's ruling on the legality of the SAP's assistance to Bancorp over 30 years ago, as well as her finding that ABSA, as the purchasing bank, was liable to pay the facility. We were particularly concerned about the binding remedial action instruction to Parliament to set in motion a process to change the constitutional mandate of the SAP away from price stability. We challenged this remedial action, as well as the public protector's other findings. The judgment, as you may know, went in our favor. The entire report was set aside, and we have finality on these issues. Our mandate to protect the value of the currency in the interest of balanced and sustainable economic growth in the country remains unchanged and enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. We will continue to vigorously defend challenges to our independence and our mandate. The issue of the mandate of the SAP is often confused with the proposed nationalization of the SAP. Some proponents of nationalization believe erroneously that such a move would facilitate a change in our mandate. This view is partly based on the premise that the SAP operates in the interest of private shareholders. This is definitely not the case. We act in the interest of the economy as a whole, guided by our mandates, and we do not favor any particular interest group or groups. Given that this issue remains very much part of current debates, it may be instructive to explain again the role that the SAP shareholders play and the SAP's view on this matter. The rights of our shareholders are extremely constrained, limited to voting for some board members at the SAP's AGM. In fact, government appoints 8 of the 15 board members, but it plays no role in the broader policy or regulatory decisions of the SAP. These decisions are the responsibility of the governor and the deputy governors, who are themselves appointed by the president. Private shareholders and board members they elect have no influence whatsoever on monetary policy, financial stability, or on banking regulation. There is also no mechanism through which the shareholders, or indeed even the board, can influence these policies. Furthermore, the SAP Act caps shareholder dividends at 10 cents per share per annum. With 2 million shares on issue and a limit of 10,000 shares per shareholder and associates, the total dividend payment by the SAP to its shareholders is 200,000 rands per year and a maximum of 1,000 rands per shareholder per year. In addition, any surplus remaining at the end of the SAP's financial year, after provisioning for bad debts, depreciation of assets, pension benefits for employees, and the payment of the dividend to shareholders, 1/10 is allocated to the reserves of the bank and 90% to government. Private shareholders do, however, represent an additional layer in the governance framework of the SAP. This helps to strengthen accountability and transparency. Shareholder elected board members add valuable expertise and inputs to the internal operations of the SAP. Getting rid of private shareholders would not necessarily improve governance. The South African experience has taught us that boards appointed by government are no guarantee of good governance, nor are they a guarantee that decisions will be taken in the interest of the broader economy. Private shareholding in central banks is a historical legacy and is no longer common. Admittedly, there is no strong argument in principle in favor of retaining private shareholders. However, we are concerned that the process could be expensive, as the shares trade for far less than what some existing shareholders are prepared to sell their shares for. Indeed, it is the case that a group of shareholders is agitating for the SAP's nationalization as they believe that they are entitled to a share of the assets of the SAP and see this as an opportunity to make enormous profits at the expense of the South African taxpayers. This could turn out to be a protracted legal process and a very expensive exercise for what would, at best, be a cosmetic gain. To reiterate, whatever the shareholding structure, the primary mandate of the SAP will remain unchanged. This past year, leading up to this AGM, has been challenging, but we have ended it on a positive note. As you are all no doubt aware, this year marks the centenary celebrations of former President Mandela's birth. The SAP played its role in these celebrations by issuing a commemorative banknote series and a commemorative 5 rand circulation coin in Tata Madiba's honor earlier this month. This was the first time in the SAP's nearly 100-year history that commemorative banknotes were issued. The full range of banknotes, as well as the commemorative circulation coin, depict the history of Madiba's long walk to freedom. At the same time as the commemorative notes, we launched a mobile app as a platform to create greater public awareness of the security, technical, and design features of our banknotes. The app also features interesting details on the life and times of Madiba, aligned with the commemorative banknotes. I encourage you all to download the mobile app from any of the mainstream app stores to learn interesting facts and details about our currency. It is our responsibility to ensure that the integrity of Madiba is reflected in the integrity and the value of our currency. This we will do not only by constantly upgrading the security features of our notes, but also through protecting the value of the currency by striving for price stability. This is, after all, the primary mandate of the SAP, and we will continue to pursue prudent monetary policy in the interest of balanced and sustainable economic growth in our country. Thank you. Let us now turn to the formal business of the day, which covers the following matters. Firstly, to receive and accept the minutes of the AGM held on the 28th of July 2017. Secondly, to receive and consider the SAP's annual financial statements for the financial year ended the 31st of March 2018, including the Director's Report and the Independent External Auditor's Report. Thirdly, to approve the remuneration of the SAP's independent external auditors, PricewaterhouseCoopers Incorporated and Sizwe Nsaluba Goboto Incorporated, in terms of Regulation 22(1)(b), read with Regulation 7.3c of the regulations for completing the audit for the 2017-2018 financial year. Fourthly, to approve the appointment of PricewaterhouseCoopers Incorporated and Sizwe Nsaluba Goboto Incorporated as the SAP's independent external auditors for the 2018-2019 financial year. Fifthly, to elect one non-executive director to serve on the SAP's board of directors. And finally, to consider any further business arising from the items just mentioned in terms of Section 7.3e of the regulations. I confirm that the Secretary of the SAP received no request for special business in terms of Regulation 7.3d of the regulations. I now call on Ms. Sheena Reynolds, the Secretary of the SAP, to confirm the shareholder representation at this meeting. Sheena? Are all of those mics not working? Thank you, Sheena. I think, can you switch off that microphone there? It might be the source of our problem. Behind the table. Thank you.
Yes.
Ah, there we go.
Now you can switch off your... Let's move on to the voting procedures. I have determined that voting on each of the matters under consideration at this AGM will take place by means of a poll conducted electronically. The electronic voting procedure is facilitated by an independent external party, Lumi Technologies South Africa Pty Limited. Can I please request Mr. Andre Vlada from Lumi to come forward and instruct those present on how to use the voting device? Unfortunately, I don't vote. So.
Thank you, Governor, and good morning. Good morning to all the Deputy Governors, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. Today's voting, for those of you that are present and entitled to vote and have chosen to vote at this AGM, would have received a handset as well as a smart card. Could I ask that you please make sure that your smart card is inserted correctly? That's with a gold chip facing you. Slot it into the top of the handset, and you should see your name and the number of votes that you represent in the top gold bar of the screen. How voting will work at this AGM is there's two formats of voting. As the chairman said, 4 resolutions will be ordinary resolutions, and one of the resolutions will be to elect a new director. For the resolutions, once the governor has finished with all the formalities of the resolution, he will then ask you to vote. At that point, you'll press 1 if you wish to vote in favor, 2 if you wish to vote against, and 3 if you wish to abstain. Once we've collected all the votes, we will close the poll and the results will appear on screen. We will go through 2 test resolutions today, one for ordinary resolutions and one for the election of a director. So let's begin with an ordinary resolution. So the resolution will come up on screen and the governor will deal with all the formalities of the resolution, and then he will say, please vote now. The resolution will open to voting. At this point you press 1 if you wish to vote in favor, 2 if you wish to vote against, and 3 if you wish to abstain. If you make a mistake during voting, just re-enter the vote that you wish to make. The last vote that you enter is the vote that we will take. Is anybody struggling at the moment? If you do, please put up your hand and one of my colleagues will come and assist you. Do we have all the votes? We're still waiting for 3 people. Please ensure on your screen you'll see a for vote received or against vote received or an abstain vote received. Okay, all in, so we will now close the poll and the results will appear up on screen. So 98.93% in favor. So that's how the ordinary resolutions work. Now we'll move on to a test election. So on the screen, the candidates will appear as well as an option to abstain if you wish to abstain. We will now open the vote. Same process, you'll now enter the number that corresponds with the candidate you wish to choose. So if you want to vote for candidate 1, you'll press 1. If you want to vote for candidate 2, you'll press 2, 3 for 3, and 4 if you wish to abstain from voting. And we have everybody's votes, so we'll close, and the results are as follows. Candidate 1 with 232 votes wins. Are there any questions around the voting procedure? Great. Could I just ask that when the AGM finishes and you leave the venue, if you could just leave the handset and smart card at registration where you received it. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Andre. We will now proceed to the business of this meeting. I propose that the minutes of the 97th AGM, which have been distributed with the annual report 2017-2018, be taken as read. Are there any questions or comments? Please note, these minutes are not for approval, they're just for noting. I propose that the minutes of the 97th AGM be accepted. And the poll is open. Okay, the poll is closed. And the results are as follows: 75.7% for, 0 against, and we have 92 abstentions. Then the minutes of the 97th AGM have been accepted on the basis of these voting results, and I declare that these are a reflection of the minutes of the previous AGM. Thank you very much. The next item that we move to is the financial statements. I now formally present to you the financial statements for the year ended 31st March 2018, including the Director's Report and the Independent External Auditor's Report. The summarized South African Reserve Bank Group annual financial statements were included in the Annual Report 2017-2018, which were published on the SAPS website and posted to the shareholders on the 25th of June 2018. The full SAP Group annual financial statements were published separately on the SAPS website on the same day. Are there any questions or comments with respect to the SAPS Group annual financial statements, including the Director's Report and the Independent External Auditor's Report? Okay, if there being none, I propose that the audited annual financial statements for the year ended 31st March 2018 be accepted. The poll is now open and you can exercise your vote. The poll is now closed. And the voting results are as follows: 3314, 0 against, and 48 abstentions. On the basis of the voting results, I declare that the financial statements for the year ended 31st March 2018 have been accepted. Thank you very much. The next agenda item is the remuneration of the South African Reserve Bank's independent external auditors. The board recommends that the independent external auditors' remuneration of 12,010,022 rands, excluding value-added tax, in respect of the general statutory audit of the SAP for the financial year ended 31st March 2018 be confirmed and approved. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, I propose that the remuneration of the SAP's independent external auditors in respect of the year ended 31st March 2018 be confirmed and approved. There's one vote to go. Done. The poll is now closed, and the results are as follows: 300 for the resolution, 1 against, and 78 have abstained. On the basis of the voting results, I declare that the remuneration of the SAP's independent external auditors for the financial year ended 31st March 2018 has been approved. The next agenda item is the appointment of the independent external auditors of the SAP for 2018-2019 financial year. In terms of Section 30 of the SAP Act, the SAP's independent external auditors should be appointed by the shareholders at this meeting. The board recommends that PricewaterhouseCoopers Incorporated and Sizwe-Nsaluba Gobodo Incorporated be reappointed as the SAP's independent external auditors for the 2018-2019 financial year. I can confirm that the lead audit partners of both firms rotate every 5 years, which is in line with best practice. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, I propose that PricewaterhouseCoopers Incorporated and Sizwe-Nsaluba Gobodo Incorporated be reappointed as the SAP's independent external auditors for the 2018-2019 financial year. The poll is now open and you can exercise your vote. The poll is now closed and the results are as follows: 306 for, 6 against, and 67 abstentions. On the basis of these voting results, I declare that PricewaterhouseCoopers Incorporated and Sizwe-Nsaluba Gobodo Incorporated have been reappointed as the SAP's independent external auditors for the 2018-2019 financial year. The auditors are congratulated on their reappointment. I now turn to the election of a non-executive director to fill the vacancy for a person with knowledge and skills in the field of commerce and/or finance. Ms. Vinette Klein's term of office expires tomorrow on the 28th July 2018, and Ms. Klein has indicated that she is not available for re-election. All the candidates to be considered for this position were confirmed by the panel appointed in terms of Section 41C of the SAP Act. This panel comprises the Governor, retired Constitutional Court Judge Ms. Yvonne Mokgoro, and Mr. Abel Sotele, both nominated by the Minister of Finance, and Mr. Kaiza Muyani, Mr. Dumisani Mtalani, and Mr. Bekin Chalinchali, all 3 nominated by NEDLEC. The panel confirmed 3 candidates. In terms of Section 41G of the SAP Act, for consideration by the shareholders for the vacancy, the panel is satisfied that all 3 candidates are eligible as well as fit and proper to stand for election as directors of the SAP. The CVs of these 3 candidates were sent to the shareholders together with the notice of this meeting. Please exercise your vote by selecting only one person with knowledge and skills in the field of commerce and/or finance from the list of the 3 nominees. Please select the number on your voting device that corresponds with the person you wish to elect. Or if you choose to abstain from voting, please select the corresponding number on your voting device. This information is on the screen now. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, there being none, the poll is now open and you can exercise your vote. The voting is now closed and the results are as follows. Dr. Yvonne Muthin, 120, Dr. Nomusa Kunta, 106, Ms. Nozukiso Siotula, 88 votes, and we have 65 abstentions. So Dr. Yvonne Muthin is congratulated on her election as non-executive director. In terms of Section 5 of the SAP Act, this appointment shall be effective from 28 July 2018 to the day after the AGM in 2021. I would like to extend a special word of thanks to Ms. Lane for the valuable service she had rendered to the board of the SAP over her 3-year term of office and in her role as the chairperson of the Remuneration Committee. Thank you very much, Ms. Lane. We wish you well for the future. I would also like to thank all the candidates for being willing to stand for election to the board and trust that they will continue to take a keen interest in the work of the SAP. This concludes the voting procedures for the day, and I would like to thank Lumi for their assistance and contribution. As mentioned earlier, the Secretary of the SAP received no request from the shareholders for special business to be placed on the agenda of this meeting in line with the regulations. Are there any other questions or comments arising from the matters under consideration at this meeting? As there are no other matters of interest that the shareholders would like to present to or raise, specifically with regard to this, I have already dealt with economic matters in my address, and I would like to then come close to the end of this meeting. There aren't any other matters, and so to the best of my knowledge, the business of the meeting has been duly transacted. I would like to take this opportunity to thank President Cyril Ramaphosa and Deputy President Mabuza, the government and the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa for their continued support. The sound working relationship between the National Treasury and the SAP has continued. I thank Minister of Finance, Mr. Nhlanhla Nene, the Deputy Minister of Finance, Mr. Mondli Gungubele, the Director General, Mr. Dondo Mohajani, as well as all the staff of the National Treasury for their ongoing support. Sincere thanks are also due to members of the board for their contribution and for ensuring appropriate corporate governance in the SAP. Sincere appreciation is also due to my colleagues who have been sharing the burden, Deputy Governors Minele, Groep, and Naidu, as well as the entire management and staff of the SAP for their continued dedication and support during what was once again a challenging year. I would like to thank them all for their contributions. I am confident that their continued efforts will ensure that the coming year is even more successful. Thank you very much indeed. I understand that Ms. Maria Ramos, who is representing a shareholder, would like to address the meeting. Ms. Ramos.
Thank you very much, Governor Kganyago. And it's my great privilege to deliver this year's vote of thanks. The year under review has been tremendously volatile and uncertain, and sometimes it's hard to believe that we have come through quite as much. Although we have seen a return to political stability and we celebrate the renewed hope and optimism, and I think as a nation we have all stood together, and as we respond to President Ramaphosa's call for Tumamina and we stand ready to lend a hand, I think it is also important, as you highlighted in your opening comments, to remind ourselves of just how much we still have to do and the tremendous economic challenges and significant challenge, particularly as we realize how much work we need to do and how much the growth challenge is, and with that growth challenge, what all of that really means for jobs and job creation. Without growth, as we all know, this economy is just simply unable to create jobs and to generate the absorptive capacity that we need for sustainability. There have been periods over the last 12 months where all really that has stood between South Africa and further downgrades by all the major rating agencies was the South African Reserve Bank and its leadership. It is therefore fitting that on behalf of the shareholders and indeed our country, that we thank Governor Kganyago for his stewardship of this critical national institution and his unwavering commitment to our Constitution and our country and its people. Governor, over the past year, you have been the recipient of a number of accolades. I think we've celebrated those with you. So again, congratulations. I think we've also felt immensely proud as you've taken the reins of the chairmanship of the IMFC. I think you're doing it at the time when we also realize that the global financial system and the global financial institutions themselves are going through a period of renewed change and questions around what they have to do, what the challenges they face, and the reform that is required of them, and indeed some questions about their own purpose and some challenges around their role and responsibility. I am of the view that shareholders and the wider South African public owe the Governor and indeed the Reserve Bank an immense debt of gratitude for his outstanding leadership of the bank and ensuring that monetary policy is conducted in a manner that has ensured that this institution stood out as a bastion of independence and excellence at the time when it was most needed and it was most tested. We often talk about our Constitution and its institutions, and they were tested over the last few years, and it's actually when they're tested like this that they are strengthened and our Constitution is strengthened as a consequence. To the Deputy Governors, thank you for your leadership, commitment, hard work and professionalism. I also want to thank, on behalf of the shareholders, the staff of the bank and the board of directors for the sterling work that has been done. The commitment and professionalism with which the bank conducts its business is fundamentally important to all its stakeholders, which principally are the South African citizens. Their annual report provides a comprehensive account of the bank's execution against its primary objective, and the Governor has spoken at length about that, which is to maintain price stability in the interests of balanced growth and sustainable economic development in the Republic. Our Constitution sets out the